monitoring the metrics of your Caddy server with Prometheus and Grafana. That's what we're going to see in this video. If you want to learn more, stick with me. So as you know, Prometheus is a broadly used standard for actually scraping the metrics of our services. By using Prometheus, you can actually scrape through the metrics of your custom services that you create for yourself or for your company, or actually using the same standards, you can actually monitor open source services like Caddy, databases, or other web servers, and almost every other tools that are out there, and we can actually make use based on our use cases. So we'll use the same standards, same protocols to actually monitor the metrics of our Caddy servers running as a Docker container. So right over here you can see that I'm in the official documentations related to the Caddy's metrics directive, and actually by using this directive and configuring it in our Caddy file, we can actually expose the relevant metrics out of our Caddy server in a defined path. So eventually a Prometheus service come and check for our defined addresses for scraping these metrics out of our Caddy servers. And later we'll actually use a Grafana dashboard to actually visualize all these metrics, and as our use cases we can actually set alert rules to actually notify us in our defined states. So I'll move down right over here. You can see the very simple syntax of this directive that we can actually make use of all this functionality. So if you want to check the exact metrics that are exported by the metrics directive, you can always check this link, but we'll just try to keep things simple and actually use the prepared Grafana dashboard to visualize the whole thing. So with having all this in mind, I'll move to VS Code. Right over here you can see that I've got some configuration files prepared in order to demonstrate this whole functionality, and over here I've got a Docker Compose file in which I've got multiple services. One is the backend service that I'm actually using an echo server that will be responding with the details of whatever request that it receives, and actually this is a service that I'll try to use to proxy behind my Caddy server. So moving down right over here, I've got my Caddy that I'm using the official Caddy image with some recent tags, and I'm setting the restart policy to actually let the Docker engine know that it has to try to restart this container for whatever reason that it might be stopped. Over here in the environment variable section, by setting time zone, I'm actually able to set the time zone of the container that will be holding my Caddy server. So on the port section right over here, I'm mapping the port 80 and 443 to exact same ports inside the container. So as a result, the clients will be using the host machine's IP address on these exact two ports to actually communicate with the Caddy server that will later configure to listen to these exact two ports and will be responding to the requests of our clients. Next, right over here on the volume section, I'm actually mapping a Caddy file which is exactly located next to my Docker Compose file to the /etc/caddy/caddy file inside the container, which will be the exact same file that the Caddy will look for in order to initially configure itself. And right over here, I'm persisting the /data and /config directory inside the container that will be created, because these two directories is the directories that the Caddy will try to store its data and configurations that it will be creating. So I'll move down right over here. You can see that I've got a Prometheus service. Again, I'm using the official image. You can change all these image names and tags based on your use cases. And on the command section, I'm actually passing some switches to the command that will be created in the Prometheus container. So by using the --config.file, I'm actually setting the Prometheus to look for the /prometheus.yaml file inside the container for its configuration file to know of the targets that it has to actually scrape through. Next, right over here on the volume section, I'm mapping the prometheus.yaml file to exact same address inside the container, and again I'm persisting some directories for my Prometheus container to actually persist its data through container restarts or destroying and starting a new Prometheus container. So on the port section, I'm mapping the Prometheus default port to exact same port inside the container, and again I'm setting the restart policy for the exact same functionality for my Prometheus server also. So lastly, down right over here, I've got the Grafana service. Again, I'm using the official image with some recent tag, and on the volume section, I'm actually persisting the directory inside the container to the /volumes/Grafana data outside the container to actually persist the Grafana data independent from the container's lifecycle. Next, right over here, I've got my environment variable section, and by setting the relevant environment variables, I'm actually defining the initial credentials for the Grafana to be able to access its web UI. And again, right over here, I'm actually mapping the default port of the Grafana from my host machine to exact same port inside the container, and again setting the restart policy to always to implement the same restart policy as my other containers. So next I'll try to move to my Caddy file right over here. You can see that on the global section I'm setting the automatic redirect from HTTP to HTTPS to off, and also I'm using the exact same syntax that we just saw on the official documentation to actually enable the metrics globally. And I'll move down right over here. You can see that I'm defining my Caddy server to listen to exact same ports that I mapped in my Docker Compose file. And right over here, you can see that I've got a handle directive that is actually matching the /metrics path. And by using the metrics directive, I'm actually telling the Caddy server to export its metrics on the /metrics path. So next, right over here, I've got another handle directive that is actually matching the /API/star pattern, and it is a reverse proxy to the backend on port 80. So this backend is the exact same name that I gave to my Echo server in the Docker Compose file. Because these two containers will be created using the same Docker Compose file and actually sharing the same network among them, they will eventually be able to call each other through their service names in the Docker Compose file. So next, I've got a Prometheus.yaml file right over here, and by setting a job for the /metrics of the target Caddy, and again this Caddy is the exact same name that I gave for my Caddy server in my Docker Compose file. If you are using some external Prometheus server that is not included in your Docker Compose file, instead of this Caddy right over here, you should be able to actually provide its IP port or fully qualified domain name and any other addresses that is actually accessible by this Prometheus container that will be created. So with having all this, I'll move to the terminal. I'll hit ls to make sure I'm in the exact same directory that I've got my configuration files. So by using the make-dir command, I'll try to actually create the volumes directory next to my Docker Compose file. So I'll hit enter, and by saying chmod -r, I'll provide 777, and I'll pass the volumes directory, so I'll hit ls-la, and you can see that the volumes directory is set to read, write, execute by the owner, the group, and all other users recursively to the all other files and directories inside the volumes directory. By doing so, we're actually preventing the permission errors that will be outputted from the Prometheus and Grafana containers, and by setting this permission on the volumes directory, we actually make these directories to be able to read, write, and execute to all the directories and files inside this exact directory. So right now, by saying docker compose up-d, I'm actually expecting my 4 containers to be up and running with a network created and attached to all these containers. So right now, if I say docker compose ps, I should be able to see the up in the status column for all my 4 containers. Also, I can check that my defined ports are successfully mapped to each of these containers. So I'll say docker compose logs -f to follow the logs and --tail 100 to grab the latest 100 lines of the outputted logs of these 4 containers. And as I can see, things are looking good and I should be able to actually make requests to my Caddy server. So I'll move to the browser right over here by providing the address of the machine that is holding my 4 containers, and I'll actually try to go to /API/ and you can see that the request is proxy to my Echo server and the response is coming back through my Caddy server. So again, if I try to access the /metrics, as you can see right over here, I've got a lot of metrics that are exported using the metrics directive, and actually each of these has a meaning for Prometheus, and later we can use these metrics to actually create our custom visualizations and custom dashboards, or actually I'll try to use a already available dashboard as a JSON file to import to my Grafana web UI. So next I'll try to access the address of my machine on the Prometheus port. Actually, if I go to the status on the target health section, you can see that I've got the Caddy/metrics that is with status up, so I can make sure that my Prometheus server is successfully connected to my Caddy server on the /metrics path, and actually it is successfully scraping through all those metrics that are exported on this exact path. So next I'll try to go to the port 3000 of the exact same address. So as a result, I should be able to access the Grafana web UI, and providing the username and password that I set as the initial credentials for my Grafana service, I'll hit enter, and it is actually requiring me to change my password. So I'll try to provide another password which is exactly the same password. So right now, as you can see, I'm in the web interface of my Grafana server, and first thing I'll try to do is move to the connections section right over here, and I'll try to add a new connection. I'll try to search for the Prometheus, and I'll choose the Prometheus from right over here. And actually I'm trying to define the connection from the Grafana server to my Prometheus server to use it as a data source. So I'll click this add new data source right over here, and I'll provide a name and address of my Prometheus server. So I'll say Prometheus on port 9090, and again, as you can see, I'm able to actually use the service name of the Prometheus service in the Docker Compose file because of that shared network stuff. So I'll skip these parts and I'll move down right over here. I'll hit the save and test button, so I can see that the connection is successfully made from my Grafana server to my Prometheus server. That actually is scraping the metrics from my Caddy server and holds metrics data in it. So next I'll try to move to the dashboards section right over here, and by hitting the new button right over here, I'll try to import a dashboard, and right over here on this very link you can find a Caddy monitoring dashboard that you can use the download button right over here to actually download the JSON file, or copy the ID of this dashboard and paste it in your import section of your Grafana web interface. So actually I downloaded the JSON file, and I'll move back to my Grafana right over here. So this is exactly the same place that you can actually paste your dashboard ID, or like me, I copy and pasted the content of the JSON file that I just downloaded, and by hitting the load button right over here, I can set the name for the dashboard that I'm importing and choose the folder for this dashboard to be resided in, and right over here I'll try to choose the Prometheus as my Prometheus data source, and if I say import, it is actually showing an error and requiring me to actually choose a Loki data source to actually connect to a Loki server and show the logs of the Caddy server that is outputted from the Caddy container. So I didn't configure this and I don't have a Loki server, so that might be another video integrating Loki with this exact setup. So I'm not doing that right now, and the thing that I'll try to do, I'll move to the VS Code right over here, and on the dashboard that I downloaded right over here, I'll try to actually remove this Loki data source from the inputs, and right now I'll try to copy and move back to my Grafana interface right over here, and I'll hit cancel to go back and paste it again right over here, and right now you can see that it is only requiring for the Prometheus data source. So I'll try to hit import button right over here, and right now you can see that my dashboard is loaded in my Grafana, and actually I've got some numbers and some visualizations right over here. So I'll try to actually set the duration to last 5 minutes, and I'll actually try to move to terminal. In another terminal right over here, I'll try to actually make some requests to my Caddy server. I use curl, provide with the machine's address, and I'll provide API. So I'll use watch command to actually execute this curl command each second. So I'll hit enter, and I'll try to move back to the Grafana interface right over here. I'll try to refresh, and as you can see, I've got some data appearing right over here, and all other things that will be evaluated and be showing right over here in each of these visualizations in this prepared dashboard. So we've got things like average response time, rate of the requests per second, and number of the requests processed. And I'll move down right over here. You can see that we've got the HTTP stats code visualization, and I'll actually move back to the terminal right over here. I'll try to remove the echo server's container. So I'll say docker rm, and I'll provide with the name of the echo server's container. As a result, I'll be receiving some errors for my requests that are received by the Caddy server. So I'll move back right over here. I'll hit refresh, and right now you can see that the 502 status is already added to this visualization right over here. And actually by doing this, I can make sure that the whole setup is working correctly and the right metrics are being exported by the metrics directive in my Caddy file, and it is successfully being scraped by my Prometheus server, and my Grafana server also connecting to that Prometheus server and visualizing all the data using this prepared dashboard. So that's all for this video. I hope you learned something new. This actually got a little longer than I expected, but actually we learned a lot how to actually use some monitoring tools to actually scrape for our metrics in our Caddy servers, or using the same steps to actually monitor our other services like our database services, our caching services, or actually other reverse proxy services like Nginx and Kong and things like that. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, I recommend you give a visit where you can learn the basic setups of Caddy and security stuff like IP restrictions, bot detections, external authentication servers, rate limiting, and cool stuff like that. So of course you can find the relevant link down in the description section of this video. So lastly, if you found the video interesting, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, which will help grow the channel and motivate me to create more free contents like this. And with that, that's all for this video, and I hope to see you in the next videos.